And as Congress gears up for votes this week to block the president's national emergency declaration on the border wall, the president on his next move.
Will I veto it? 100%. 100%. And I don't think it survives a veto. We have too many smart people that want border security, so I can't imagine it could survive a veto, but I will veto it, yes.
My next guest is making his own prediction about how it all plays out. Senator Lindsey Graham is with me this morning, Republican from South Carolina. He is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee and serves on the Senate Appropriations, Foreign Relations, and Budget Committees as well. Good to see you, Senator. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So how does this play out? The Democrats going to put this resolution up on Tuesday of this upcoming week. Then it moves to the Senate. Can you tell us what happens then?
We might lose a few Republicans in the Senate. All you need is 51 to get it out of the Senate. So it'll pass the House with a handful of Republican votes. It'll come to the Senate. It might get 51. It'll get vetoed by the president, and Republicans will stand with the president to sustain his veto, and it will be deader than dead.
So what do you want to say about this? I mean, here we have a situation where we continue to see break-ins at the border, at the ports as well. I mean, why would Republicans not be behind the president on this?
Well, some people believe that the emergency declaration could lead to Democrats in the future doing the same thing on other issues. That's not my concern. My concern is a broken border. It is not a manufactured crisis, and what upsets me so much is that in 2013, almost all Democrats voted for $9 billion for border security, for barriers, as part of a $44 billion package. So to my Republican friends, it's clear to me they're not recognizing President Trump won. They're not having the same attitude about barriers under Trump as they did Obama. You're basically legitimizing, marginalizing the Trump presidency by not standing by the president, because the Democrats are not playing fair with President Trump. He doesn't have any choice but to declare a national emergency, and he has all the legal authority he needs to do it.
And in terms of the money that he can gain from other agencies as a result of the national emergency, we're talking about, what, $3 billion roughly from the money in the Treasury. I mean, tell us where this money comes from and why you believe that these are monies that have been appropriated but not used and are available to the president in this regard.
Well, he wants $5.7 billion. Now, what does that number represent? That number represents the top 10 priorities of the Department of Homeland Security as to where you actually need barriers. This is not President Trump sitting down and making stuff up. This is what the professionals tell us we need. These are the top 10 sites that we need a barrier to protect the border, and the total cost is $5.7. You take the $1.375 out of that, what Congress gave him, and you go into the military construction bill, you go into other pieces of legislation, you move money around, and you build out the wall, the barrier. That's where he's going to get the money from, some from here, some from there. And the National Emergency Declaration has been used 50 times. Obama sent troops to the border. Bush 43 sent troops to the border. Trump is sending troops to the border. What's the difference between sending a soldier to the border to shore up the border than having a soldier build a barrier while they're there?
Yeah.
He has all the legal authority he needs, and I hope the Republicans will stand behind him. This is a defining issue in our party.
Well, is this a defining issue also for 2020? I mean, is that what this is all about, Senator, 2020? Because we show the picture of the wall in Nancy Pelosi's state virtually every Sunday, that wall that separates San Diego from Tijuana. And we know that that wall works, but of course, when it comes from President Trump, Nancy Pelosi says it's immoral. So is this just about 2020, really, at the end of the day?
This is about they hate Trump so much they will not give him a fraction of what we did for Obama and Bush. And to my Republican colleagues, we've sat down in good faith and tried to negotiate with Democrats, and it basically stiffed the president and us. This is the only path left for the president. He made a promise to secure the border. It is not a manufactured crisis. It is a real serious national security problem. Stand behind the president as he goes through other accounts to get the money to build the barriers we need to be safe. This is about keeping your promises as President Trump. This is a great issue for 2020. It's a national security issue, but it's a political issue also. In the Democratic world, there is no border crisis. It's all manufactured. In President Trump's world, in my world, There's a real problem at the border, and we're going to deal with it. That's a good debate to have.
Let me move on to another border, and that is the border of Venezuela and Brazil. We've got news this morning on this. Of course, Maduro has been defiant. He is blocking the aid that the allies have sent. Where is this going, and what's your reaction to now? We're talking about fatalities as a result of what has taken place yesterday with this unrest.
The Maduro regime will crumble over time. The international community, except for some outliers, are behind President Trump. This is his finest hour from my point of view. The speech he gave in Miami was his Reagan moment, where he talked about the benefits and the hope of freedom and democracy versus the scourge of socialism at home and abroad. This was his tear down this wall moment. So the people of Venezuela are going to keep coming and coming and coming, and the military is eventually going to realize that if they kill their own people, they're going to be war criminals in the eyes of the international community. And I'm trying to get Turkey and others to break away from Maduro and stand with Trump. So this regime will fall, and when it's all said and done, it will be President Trump who led us to this moment. This is a big deal in our backyard.
It will fall, but right now, you know, he's digging in. He's mocking President Trump. He's mocking Guaido. He says yesterday, I'm vowing to never surrender.
Keep it up. He's going to fall because he doesn't have the trust of his people. Give me a scenario of where he turns Venezuela around. Show me how he can govern that country. He's a thug. He's a dictator. Bernie Sanders may not see that, but I see it. But most importantly, we finally got a president who stands up for our values in our backyard. And not only will Maduro fall, we're going to put pressure on Nicaragua and Cuba next. We're going to have in our backyard freedom and democracy, and we're going after socialism on all fronts, including here at home. So I'll make a prediction on your show. It's not when Maduro, it's not if he falls, it's only when. It's just a matter of time. It's unsustainable. And to the people of Venezuela, the American people have your back. The Trump administration has your back.
All right, we'll keep watching that. Let me move on to Syria. News on Friday night. You know, Senator, that the U.S. is now going to leave a total of 400 troops in Syria. Initially, when the news first broke that the president was pulling all 2,000 troops from Syria, you were not happy about it. You discussed this with Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan when you were at the Munich Security Summit. Your reaction to now leaving 400 troops on the ground? Are they safe?
Yeah, they'll be safe, and the most important thing, they'll keep us safe. The reason we went into Syria is because Obama sat on the sidelines and watched Syria get dismantled by the Russians and the Iranians coming to Assad's aid. President Trump was dealt a bad hand in Syria, but he's played it very well. The caliphate has been destroyed. Well done, Mr. President. You promised to destroy the caliphate. We're down to a few blocks. These 200 troops in northeastern Syria will attract about 1,000 NATO types. We'll have a stabilizing force. What have we accomplished? ISIS will never come back now. And what had been an 80% American presence, 20% European, it's flipped to where the forces now will be 80% European, 20% American. Iran cannot come down and take over the oil with this stabilizing force, and Turkey and the Kurds will not go to war. This was one of the smartest decisions the president has made. We've interdicted the flow of arms from Tehran to Beirut. The Iranians were using a superhighway down south to get arms to be used against Israel. Part of this force will stop that. This is a very smart adjustment. It will make sure ISIS doesn't come back. Turkey and the Kurds will not go to war, and Iran is the biggest loser of this.
All right, so you do not believe then this will be pulling out to the extent that ISIS will be able to regroup and come back? You think the 400 troops on the ground will be enough to keep them at bay in terms of regrouping?
This is the Trump doctrine. 200 American forces will attract 1,000 Europeans. It's time for Europe to step up. Europe is hit harder from the caliphate than even the United States. Thousands died in Europe because of what happened in Iraq and Syria. So here's what Trump has said. I will stand with you. We'll provide air cover, and we'll have a small force on the ground. But you got to do most of this stabilizing force, and they will. I predict that 80% of this force in northeastern Syria will be Europeans, not Americans. And Trump has flipped it. It used to be 80% of us. Now it's going to be 80% Europeans, and that's the way it should be. And the force down south will prevent Iran from flowing weapons from Iran into Lebanon and Syria to hurt Israel. This was a really smart move. It changed the dynamic on the ground, and I want to applaud the president for making an adjustment that Obama would never make.
All right, we want to move on to China because you've got U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer testifying this upcoming week at a House hearing talking about the China trade issues. Look, we've talked about China aggressiveness on this program a lot in the last year and a half. It's not just trade and tariffs. It's espionage, it's military aggressions, it's forced transfer of technology and IP theft.
Right.
This past week, I spoke with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and he characterized Chinese telecom company Huawei and his discussions in the last 2 weeks with officials in Europe, in particular Poland. Listen to what he said. I've got to get your reaction to this, Senator. Watch.
So we have spent time not just at this ministerial in Warsaw last week where we had some real successes, but over the past months we've been out around the world just making sure everybody had the same information, that countries understand the risk of putting this Huawei technology into their IT systems. We can't forget these systems were designed by with the express work alongside the Chinese PLA, their military in China. They are creating a real risk for these countries and their systems, the security of their people. Europeans care deeply about their privacy. The risk to privacy from this technology is very, very real. And we're out sharing this information, the knowledge that America has gained through its vast network, and making sure countries understand the risk. That's important. We think they'll make good decisions when they understand that risk.
It's not even just the risks for them. It's the risks for the world. I mean, if you are in high-level talks about national security with Poland, with the Five Eyes, I mean, your Americans' information is out there, too, because China has tapped into their network.
There's a second piece that we've shared with them as well, which is if a country adopts this and puts it in some of their critical information systems, we won't be able to share information with them. We won't be able to work alongside them. In some cases, there's risk. We won't even be able to co-locate American resources, an American embassy or an American military outpost. There's real risk, and we want to make sure they know not only the risk to their own people, but their risk of being able to work alongside the United States and keeping the world safe.
Senator, what's your reaction? That was a major headline to me. Are we going to not share information if they've got Huawei Telecom?
Well, my initial reaction is thank God that Mike Pompeo is the Secretary of State, because he speaks a language even I can understand. Yes, if you're a European country thinking about going on the 5G Chinese network, what Mike Pompeo is saying to you is that we believe this is a spying platform that will not be able to share information with you that we would have otherwise, because you'll be giving it to China, and the technology you're buying for China will basically crowd you out of the American market. The Trump administration's told the world, if you do business with Iran, you're not going to do business with the United States. This is a dictatorial regime, and we're trying to crush it. I think what Mike is saying pretty clearly, if you pick Chinese technology, like the 5G systems they're trying to sell, you'll wind up losing access to American information and systems. Make a wise decision.
Wow, that is a big statement there.
President Trump says he expects to have a trade summit with his Chinese counterpart very soon. It could herald a breakthrough in the months-long standoff over Chinese trade policies the president has deemed unacceptable. Correspondent Kevin Corke is at the White House to tell us what else the president's saying after this latest meeting at the Oval Office.
Is it more likely that a deal happens or doesn't happen? Speaking for the United States, I would say it's probably more likely that a deal does happen.
In perhaps his most optimistic reading of the talks yet, President Trump this afternoon signaled that the ongoing trade dispute between the U.S. and China could soon be nearing an end.
We want to make this a deal that's going to last for many, many years, and a deal that's going to be good for both countries. But we want to make it meaningful.
Trump's outlook was echoed by China's vice premier, who said a deal was very likely, and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who announced that the Chinese negotiators who've been here in Washington for several days would extend their visit to build on progress that's been made this week. The Oval Office meeting today comes as the president prepares to meet the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, whose historic Singapore gathering with the president last year produced a joint statement with the sides agreeing to peaceful relations, the recovery of U.S. troops remains, follow-up talks, and the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. While the latter remains an elusive but ultimate goal, the president has hailed progress, including the cessation of missile testing by Pyongyang. But the news hasn't been all positive. The recently released Worldwide Threat Assessment declared that North Korea is unlikely to completely give up its nuclear weapons and production capability.
Its leaders ultimately view nuclear weapons as critical to regime survival.
Coates is not alone in his skepticism of the North. CIA Director Gina Haspel accused Pyongyang of being committed to developing a long-range nuclear-armed missile that would pose a direct threat to the United States. The stark language from the president's senior intelligence cadre brings into sharp focus the stakes of the upcoming summit, particularly for our partners in the region like Japan and South Korea.
We now have a situation where the relationships are good, where there's been no nuclear testing, no missiles, no rockets. We got our hostages back.
And a possible meeting coming up in March between the president and Xi Jinping.